Okay, Rabbi Rothman.
Okay, so I'm going to speak today about the part of the Haggadah Shal Pesach where it talks about the four sons. And the leader of the Seder, the father of the family, apparently is trying to speak to his children. And he has four different sons. So the Torah guides us how a person can speak to all the different types of people. The lashon of the Haggadah is Keneged Arba Banim Dibra Torah, in correspondence to the four sons the Torah spoke. So what that means is that the Torah addresses every type of person, every type of attitude that exists. The Torah is there to bring him near, to explain to him what he needs to know. So many times people think that they're somehow not inside, they're different. The Torah doesn't speak to them, and they get discouraged from that. So here the Baal God is describing to us that that's not true. The Torah is speaking to every single person. That the Torah was brought down from Hashem's wisdom to speak to every kind of person, wherever he is, every type of attitude. And all the attitudes that people have, they're all included in all of us to some extent. And then there's some people that have more of one, more of the other. So the Haggadah speaks about that. And it says that the Torah speaks to all the type of people. And the examples, the four examples are, the one is a wise son, one is the evil son, one is the simple son, and one is the son that doesn't know how to ask. So those are the four types of sons. But really, it's not only sons, it's four types of attitudes. And the Torah is telling us that it addresses all of them. Now, the truth is, just on the surface, a person could be confused about that because he could say, well, if you look at the Torah and you look how complicated it is, and look how deep it is, and you look how demanding it is, so it seems like it's only for the Chacham, it's only for the wise son. It's not for the evil son. It's not for the simple son or the son who doesn't know how to ask questions. It doesn't seem like that. But it's telling us that's not true. It's telling us it's really for all of them. So how do you understand that? Why is it so complex then? And why is it so demanding of intense scholarship on the highest levels when it's for everybody? So I think that for one thing, you have to understand that what's a wise person? Well, Ezel Chacham, it says in Pirkei Avot, it says, what's a wise person? A wise person is someone who learns from everyone else. So that means a person that's wise is not a person that has a very lofty intellect and knows a lot, has a lot of knowledge. A wise person is a person that's inquisitive, that's looking for knowledge, that's looking for understanding, that's humble. He's humble, and therefore he learns from every person. Wherever he hears wisdom, he goes after it. He's interested in hearing it because he's a person that his heart is open and is curious and has wonder and fascination to understand about life, to understand about the Torah. So that's a wise person. So what we're learning here is that the Torah is not just given to the wise person, it's given to every person, and even to the Rasha, because the Rasha could become a wise person also, and in that sense, for sure. And the simple person could be a wise person in that sense, so he could become a person that's curious, that's looking for truth, that's looking to grow, that's humble, and therefore a person that learns from every other person. So the Torah, it teaches each person how he can get to that place of starting to listen, starting to open up, starting to put aside his distracted concerns and his sense of not succeeding or being different. So the Torah addresses all those type of people. And one more thing I want to say in this introduction also is that before I go and talk about the four sons, I want to say that the Torah says, the Haggadah says like this, it says, Neged Arba Banim Dibra Torah. In correspondence to the four sons, the Torah speaks. And then it says, who are the four sons? One's wise, one's evil, one's simple, and one doesn't know what to ask. And then it says what each one says, and then it says what the father answers him. So it's interesting. First, it sounds like the Torah addresses each one, and then it tells the father, the teacher, how to address each one. So which one is it? The Torah speaks to all four sons, or you, when you're teaching, you have to know how to teach all four sons. Like it's not too clear. It should have said how the Torah speaks to all four people, but it says what ends up in the story is it describes how the teacher can teach all four people. So what does that mean? So I think what it means is that the Torah, when a person learns Torah, so he becomes that person who goes a little bit out of his self-preoccupation, and he learns how to speak to every other person. So, in other words, just like the Torah is there to guide every person and to elevate every person, to bring every person to his potential, also someone who learns Torah and someone who teaches Torah, and all of us has potential to be also to go out of ourselves and to be able to relate to each person for the way he is. In other words, we can be present and understand the different attitudes and teach them and be attuned to how to teach them when we learn Torah. It's sort of like when the Ger came to Hill and he said, teach me the whole Torah on 1 foot. So Hill said, what you hate, don't do to others. And that's the whole Torah, and the rest is the parish, his explanation. So what that means is that that when you do that, when you start letting go of your self-preoccupation, you start looking at what the other person needs. What you don't like, don't do to the other person. So you start being outward focused and being aware of the other guy and trying to help him and be there for him. So then you're actually connected to the whole Torah, because that's what Hashem does. Hashem is there for us. The whole Torah is there to elevate us, to guide us. So when we become like that, when we become the person that's aware of others and is looking to help them and reach out to them, so then we're actually fulfilling the whole Torah, because we're going in the ways of Hashem and we're connected to the whole Torah. So that's what this shmooze is about here in the beginning. So there's 4 sons. There's 4 sons. I wanted to put up the text, but I wasn't able to do that. But I'm going to read you the text a little bit. So skipping, first we start with the Chacham, and we come back to that. Starts with the wise son, but I want to start with the evil son. So the evil son, what does he say? He says, Ma avodah zos lechem. What is this service to you? Lechem v'lo lo. In other words, he says that all the things which you are doing, like it's a story that's happening at the Seder table. And it's obviously not just at the Seder table, it's the attitude that this son has. He feels excluded, he feels insecure, he feels like he's not connected to what's going on with the people around him, that they are telling him that mitzvahs are so important and the Torah is so important and he has to learn it and he has to keep the mitzvahs, and it's not working for him. And he doesn't feel that it's bringing him to where he wants to get. So he says at the Seder table, he says, what's all this thing? What are you doing? Like, what does this mean? It doesn't have any meaning to me. I'm not part of this. So the Baal God is calling him a Rasha. He's calling him an evil son. Now the truth is, he's not an evil son, because he's there at the table and he's expressing himself. And an evil son is something much worse than that. An evil person is someone who's very aggressive and against, and he's not that. But he's a son that feels insecure and left out and like he's not included. And he expresses himself that way. He says, what's this to you? So he excludes himself. So now the Torah teaches us, so how do you talk to a guy like that? How do you speak to someone who is not part of the system, who takes himself out of the system? He said, this is not for me. I don't care about this. Like all the things you're talking about, they don't relate to me. So how do you relate to him? What do you do with him? So the answer here is very, very deep, very beautiful. So it says, because he took himself out of the group of the Jewish people by saying, what's all this to you? What's all this mitzvahs and all this Jewish history? Doesn't matter to me. So he excluded himself. So af ata hake et shinav. It says you should blunt his teeth. You say to him, you blunt his teeth. How do you blunt his teeth? You say, if you had been, he said, because of this, Hashem brought me out of Egypt. Because of my involvement in the mitzvahs, because of my involvement in the Torah, my investment in learning mitzvahs and doing mitzvot and doing the Torah, therefore we were brought out as a nation out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt. And you who are excluding yourself, you're saying you're not part of this, you don't care about these things we're doing, it doesn't talk to you, it wasn't there for you, so there you were not going to go out of Mitzrayim. That's what you say to him. So you blunt his teeth. What does it mean you blunt his teeth? And what is this answer? So the answer is that the key to a person is his free choice. And everybody has free choice. And nobody ever is cut off from free choice. And that's the essence of the person. That's what the Torah addresses. So he's saying that he's gone. He's not in. And you tell him that that's your choice. What seems to you like not a choice, this is the way you feel. Your feelings are so strong. Your thoughts are so negative. But really, that's just, okay. I can put this up. Good. Let me put up my screen share. Okay. Okay, screen share's up. Oh no, that's not it. Sorry, no mistake making. Going back. Wrong one. That's not it. Sorry, 1 second.
I did not mean to throw you off like that. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Well, let me just see if I can find it. I don't see it now. Okay, it doesn't matter. I'll just skip it. I'll just keep reading from I got it. Okay, so the to the Ben Russia, so he says, like, what's this to you? And he excludes himself. All these mitzvahs, I don't care about them. I'm not interested. And you tell him, you blunt his teeth, and you tell him, if you had been in Egypt with this attitude, so then you would not have gone out. So why is that the right answer for him? It sounds like you're telling him, like, you're not part of things. That's what he was afraid of. So you're not saying you're not part of it. Saying if you would have had this attitude, then you would have excluded yourself. But the attitude is up to you. So you really blunt his teeth. What it means, you blunt his teeth, it means you take the sharpness out of his attitude. You're saying, listen, it's not my problem that you're feeling this way. It's your problem that you have this negative feeling, this negative attitude. You feel like you're lost. You feel like you're not part of this. You feel like it's not good for you. It's not doing anything for you. But that you should know that's your choice. There's a certain choice there, even though you don't see it, you don't feel it, that your discouraged feelings are not written in stone, and you can find other feelings, and it's your choice, and nothing. And it's not my responsibility. It's your responsibility. You should know that everyone has free choice, and Hashem loves you, and Hashem gave you free choice, and the Torah is there for you, and Torah is talking to you. And if you're not hearing it, so then that's because of the way you're thinking, and the way you're seeing things at this time. And there could be you could come to a place where you are hearing it. So if you let yourself quiet down, so you will be able to hear it. So actually, you answered him the most beautiful answer. You answered him that it's up to you. You gave him back. You put him back. Put the ballpark in his. There's nothing he can do to you now. It's not an argument with him and you. You're not forcing him to keep the Torah. You're not convincing him to keep the Torah because it's not your choice. It's his choice. So therefore, you told him the choice is yours, and the wisdom is in you, and the ability to hear the Torah is there because the Torah speaks to every single person. And if you would come with this attitude and saying that you're not part of it, so then you'll end up excluding yourself. But that's your choice. So that's what you tell the Ben Russia. So it's very beautiful. It's the way people have to deal with someone who's turned off. You don't try to convince them unless they start to want to hear it. If they want to hear what you have to say, then you could start convincing them. If they give you permission to explain something, you can explain it. If they're not giving you permission to explain it, if they're just saying, I'm not in this, I don't like it, what's going to do with me? Nothing. I just want to go do the things I want to do. So you tell them, okay, but you know what's going to happen from that is you're going to exclude yourself from something that's very great. And he's like everyone else. He wants to succeed. Everyone wants to succeed. He just doesn't think he can. So you tell him that you can. And you don't tell him how because you don't know how, because only he does. Because the ability to choose is in every person. And we can always find deeper wisdom when we look for it. Okay, so that's the first son. That's the Russia. Now the second son is the second son I want to speak about, at least over here, is the Tam. So Tam, what does he say? Ma Tam Omer. What does the Tam say? Ma Zot. He says, what is this? So you have the whole Seder, you have all the things going on. You have, people are reclining and they're eating matzah. They have matzah and they have maror and they have charosas and they have dipping and they have all kinds of things going on. They're wearing a kittel and they're all those shining table and they're moving things around. And the Tam is not really getting it. He's not aware of what's going on. He's very distracted. He's not so curious. He's very mildly curious. He says, what's this? That's his curiosity. Yes, that's the extent of his curiosity. So he doesn't know how to connect either. So he's sort of out of it, He doesn't know where to go with all this. He doesn't see it, doesn't really respond to it. His feelings are not aroused, not very much. A little bit. He says, what's this? So what do you do with him? So in that, the Haggadah answers, you tell him, V'amarta elav v'chozik yad hotzianu Hashem mitzrayim beis avdim. With a strong arm, Hashem brought us out of Egypt from the house of servitude. So what you tell him is you start telling him the story. So a story is the way to open up everybody's curiosity, everybody's fascination. Every single person in the world, I think almost, loves a story. Stories are universal language. When you start telling a story, so the person gets interested. He says, "Oh, this is a story." The saying is that a story is worth 1,000 words. One story is worth 1,000 words because a story embodies wisdom, and in particular, a story always embodies faith. Every story has the same theme. A story is you have a hero, and he's going along doing his thing, and then all of a sudden things don't work out, and things go down, 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 till he's stuck in a place where he can't get out. And then he perseveres somehow, he doesn't give up, and things get better. That's every single story in the world. If you look at the theme of every story, that's every story. So every story is about faith. Every story is about that people come to a place where they don't know how to succeed, and then if they persevere, they will succeed. So every story is about faith. And so people love stories. Everybody in the world loves stories. I mean, I think someone told me once that that's why everyone's on their screen all the time. Like, why are they so addicted to their smartphones, people? So somebody told me a good idea that they like the stories. They're seeing pictures and stories all the time, and people really need stories because they're looking for faith. Because faith is what brings life. When you have faith, you're alive. When you have discouragement, you're not alive. When you give up, you're not alive. You're losing your life. When you have faith that things will work out, that things are good, that things have a purpose, so then you come to life. So you tell the simple person who's not so with it, you tell him a story. You start telling about the story of going out of Egypt. And then what happens is that wakes him up, that starts to bring out his faith, bring out his curiosity. And so he starts to listen deeper, and he starts to become a wise person as well. So you're bringing everyone to wisdom. You're bringing the evil person to wisdom because he realizes that he has to make the choice, and the choice is his. And then he starts to get curious. He starts to look for how to make a choice and how to find his way towards what he really wants instead of giving up. And then you talk to the simple person, and you tell him a story. And he's fascinated by the story, and he hears the ideas behind the story, and he starts to listen to them. He starts to think, oh, what's this about, and how this is. I'm feeling faith. I'm feeling strength by listening to these stories, which are all stories are about faith. So that's how you talk to the simple person. Now, the third person over here is the Einu Deya L'Shol. He doesn't know how to ask. So on that, so what kind of person is this person that doesn't know how to ask? So it seems to me that he's a well-meaning person. He's interested, but he's not articulate. He doesn't seem to have the ability to ask questions. He doesn't have that articulate focus that what is he curious about? What does he not understand? He may be curious generally. He may be involved generally, but he's very quiet and he's not articulate. So that's also a type of problem. The person has to be opened up. The person has to ask his questions so he can find his answers. So how do you address him? So the Bala Gata says, Ad Pesaklo, Shenemar, Vigata Lebincha, Biomahu Lemor, Bavorza Sa Shemli, Betsesi, Mimitzrayim. You open up for him, it says. Like it says, and you will tell your son in that day, because of this, Hashem did for me when I went out of Mitzrayim. So basically the answer is, you open up for him. You start to arouse in him the questions. You start to get interested in him, and you start to lead. You start to focus on the person. And it's interesting thing. It says in the God, it says the lashon of at. It's a feminine word. Instead of saying ata pesachlo, till now we're talking about a man reading this. That was the story. Now all of a sudden become a woman. At pesachlo. You, the feminine, open up for him. That means you start to be sort of receiver for him. You start to go to this person that doesn't know how to ask, and you take an interest in him, and you start arousing questions and start sharing your questions with him until he starts to ask, and then you start to respond to him. And so basically you bring out his questions, the one who is not articulate. You help him, you ask questions with him. You take an interest in what he has to say. You draw out from him what he's trying to say. So you become like a woman, you become like a receiver of him. So that's how you teach the person that is not articulate. Okay, so these are 3 examples of the types of people that exist that they all need to be taught. They all need to be brought out. The Torah is teaching them, and the person that's the teacher over here, he has to know how to do this. He has to bring out from himself his ability to relate to each person and bring out each person. Now I want to go back to the Chacham. So the first one was the Chacham. I want to do that last because I want to dwell on that one a little more. And I want to explain to you some things from Rav Kook, how he explains this very deep, very interesting things. So the Chacham, it says like this. The Chacham, Ma'u Omer, what did the Chacham say? Meir, the Chacham, what does he say? He says, what are all these testimonies and these statutes and these judgments which Hashem commanded us, or commanded you? But he's not excluding himself. He means us, all of us. You say back to him like the laws of the Pesach. You tell him the laws of the Pesach, and you tell him that you don't eat anything after the Pesach. There's no dessert after the Pesach. Pesach is the last thing we eat on the Seder night. On Leil Pesach is the Pesach itself, the Korban Pesach. After we're full already, but then we eat the Korban Pesach, and you're not allowed to eat anything after that. So you tell them the halachas of the Pesach, and you tell him that. So who is this Chacham? What kind of person is he, and how does he fit into this discussion? So the Chacham, it seems to me, is a person that he is curious, and he is inquisitive, and he is articulate. So he's very present in that way, but he doesn't know how he's going to bring out his potential. He wants to know how to bring out his potential. And he has a particular question here, which is very interesting. His question is, what are all these details of the Torah? How come, especially he's asking about the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah. He wants to know, why is the oral Torah so complicated? Why does it have so many details and so many principles and legal concepts? Why do we have such a complicated Torah? And then we have a complicated mitzvahs with all these details, and then you have gigantic discussion of them. You have the whole Shas, and you have Mishnah, Gemara, Poskim, Chuvos, all describing all the details of all the mitzvahs. And what the Chacham wants to know is that the Torah is supposed to teach me how to live, how to get close to Hashem, how to become a better person, how to improve my midot, and so how is all the details, all the technicalities? When you learn this, you learn about teruva, mixtures of chametz, very complicated, very, very complicated. And there's so many details, So the Chacham says, okay, if you want me to learn all that, I could learn it, but why should I? Like, what's it going to do for me, for the world, for Hashem, that I should get caught up in so many technicalities? Why do I have to figure out what are the subtle legal concepts behind everything? When I'm learning the laws of damages, the laws of korbanot, or the laws of the laws of kedushin and gittin, and I have to study all. I don't even get involved in that. The guy's, maybe he's married already, or who knows what. It's not his problem. But we study all the laws and all the details, and we go into such depth into them. So he's asking, what's all this for? And even the Cheder Tzol Pesach, we're talking this detail, and that. Someone wants to know, like, what is it all for? How is that? Is that going to bring me to my potential? I want to be close to Hashem. I want to be a tzaddik. I want to do things for Klal Yisrael. So what's all these details? Apparently that's the question, the wise son's question. So it's a very good question. He's a wise son and he's asking a good question, but he's confused. He doesn't know, is he, you're telling him he should sit for 10 hours, for 14 hours, studying, Masechta Gittin, Masechta Yevamos. Like, why should I do that? What is it going to do for anybody? So that was the question. So the answer is that you tell them the laws of the Korban Pesach, and then it says, and you tell them this particular law, which is you don't eat anything after you eat the Korban at the end of the night. The Korban Pesach is the last thing, and you can't eat after that. So how does that answer his question? So basically, Rav Kook explains this in it very beautifully, and two different aspects I want to bring out over here. And one thing he says is that that when you learn the details of the mitzvah, so that's the thing that actually brings you more near to the mitzvahs, to the feeling of the mitzvah as a whole. In other words, the mitzvahs are given to us from a very, very high place. The divine wisdom is way higher than our wisdom, and every one of the mitzvahs comes from divine wisdom. But it's something that there is wisdom in it. There is wisdom that we can actually access more or less. Although many times we can't access it easily. We can talk about the mitzvahs. We can try to find ideas which might describe what's going on in them, some ethical implications of the mitzvahs, some philosophical depths of the mitzvahs. We do try to talk about them. We try to study that as much as we can. But we're going to be outside of it until we study the details of the mitzvah as well. We have to know the halachot, the laws, the principles behind the laws in the mitzvahs. And as we start to understand all the facets of a mitzvah, so what happens is, and you start to study them and analyze them, you start to get clarity about what the whole mitzvah looks like. The mitzvah of Yom Tov. There's a whole masechta called Masechta Beitzah. So it describes all the mitzvahs of Yom Tov, like if you're allowed to carry, where you're allowed to carry, what you're allowed to carry, all the laws of Muktzah, the rabbinical laws as well, but all the mitzvahs of Yom Tov. So if the whole masechta, you study all these details and the details of the details, and you bring it from the Gemara to the Rishonim to the Aharon to the Shulchan Aruch, if you can. And that's what they're telling the Chacham to do, and he doesn't know why. So they're telling that because when you do that, what happens is that's the way to understand the mitzvah itself. When you start to get clarity of mind about the parameters, the facets of the thing that you're studying, so what happens is you start to see the whole thing itself, and the feeling towards that thing starts to grow. You start to get a feeling for the mitzvah. There's a famous thing from the Chazon Ish. He spoke about this. He said that why is it that in yeshivas they learn a lot of times, they learn the masechtas about civil law, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Batra. Why do we study those masechtas so much about stealing and damages and all those kind of things? Law, land, property laws, things like that, property laws. Why do we study so much of that as young people in yeshiva? That's what the Chazon Ish asked. And he answered, because when eventually a person goes and out into the world beyond yeshiva, and he has to deal with finances, with money, and he has to somehow make a living and pay his debts and do all that, so it gets very difficult. Dealing with money is one of the biggest challenges that we have. And people tend to get discouraged, and sometimes they'll cheat and lie and steal, even in subtle ways, when they're pushed up against a wall. But if a person invested all those years in yeshiva studying the details of stealing and damaging and property laws and civil laws and all those things, he studied years of them, what happens is it becomes part of him. He understands what the mitzvah looks like. He understands the beauty of the mitzvah. He understands the depth of the mitzvah. It's because he's seen all the facets, so he's clinging to that mitzvah. He goes above his human limitations, and he starts to grasp the divine truth of these laws and how important it is not to steal, and how the details of not stealing, what they are, and how they all come together to explain this mitzvah to be part of what's really the right thing for a person to do. So basically, because he invested into all those details, that's what brings him closer to the feeling for the mitzvah itself. So basically, that's what it means in the last part. So the answer to the Chacham is like this. He says, why do we have all these details, these laws and mishpatim and chukim and edot? What's the point of all these things? How is it going to make me a better person? How's it going to make me closer to Hashem? How's it going to make me more in touch with myself? So you tell them the laws of the Pesach. So you start teaching him. He says, no, we're going to do that. I'm going to show you how this works. So this is the story here. You start teaching the laws of the Pesach, when you bring the Korban Pesach, where you bring it, how you shecht it, who can eat it, how many people can be in a chabura, all the laws of the Korban Pesach, very big discussion. And you start teaching the Chacham all these laws. And then what happens is, then you tell them for this particular law that ein maftirin acher Pesach afikomen, that after the Pesach, you don't add anything else. Meaning to say that as a result of learning all the details of the mitzvot, so then what happens is you get this strong feeling for this mitzvah. You become attached to it. It becomes a mitzvah that you love, that you're committed to more and more. And then when you have this feeling, that's it. That's where you're going. You're going for a feeling. You're going for a deep feeling. That's at the center of Judaism. I think there's an expression called a Yiddish feel, like a Jewish feeling. You're connected to this mitzvah. And now you don't do anything after that. You don't eat any other foods. You don't get involved in any other discussions, trying to analyze it more. Once you got that deep feeling, so that's like the goal. That's good. That's where you're trying to get to. That's going to bring you close to Hashem through the world of feeling that comes as a result of the intellect, of using your mind. You're going to study whatever you can study. You're going to study the Mishnah. You're going to study the Chumash. You're going to study the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch. And the more you get the picture of how these mitzvahs look, and the more you invest in them, understanding the details and the principles behind them, what happens is you start to see the mitzvah and you start to connect to it, and you start to, the feeling of it comes out. So that's the answer to the Chacham. So the answer to the Chacham is that how are you going to bring out your potential? So how am I going to bring out potential? How, particularly, I want to perfect myself as much as I can, like everyone wants to. And how are you going to tell me to waste my time with all these details? To explain to him it's not a waste of time. When you start putting yourself into the details, what's going to happen is that's where your heart's going to go with it. When you see these mitzvot, which are so above us, but you start examining all the different facets of them, what happens is you'll see the mitzvah. It'll become something that you'll love, something that you want to do, that you want to be connected to. It'll connect you, and you'll see the reasons in the mitzvahs even more. And so the feeling for the mitzvah is actually based on the understanding of the mitzvah, at least to some extent. The more you see the details and the facets, that's when you start to feel it. So you tell them when you get that feeling for the afikomen, which for the feeling for the Pesach, so you don't go any further than that. That's where you want to get. You want to get to a feeling. Yeah. So then in another place, Rav Kook asks, he says, that's so interesting. He says that, one second, I'll just refer to this spot over here in Rav Kook. So later when he's talking about at the end of the Seder, he's talking about the Vikomen. So he says like this. He says, Kasher b'harkava hanachona haseichel haregesh hapanimi bonim osher adam. Sar tamid ledat. Shafa pi shaseichel hu lechora umid elyona me'aregesh. Agzil rak kozman she'ena regesh mitaleh lemaram uzo. Al pikoch haseichel ba'atzmo. So he says like this. I want to just read you. I'll translate this piece from Rav Kook for a minute. He says, when the proper mixture of the intelligence and the feeling are built up in a person, they built up the inner wealth of a person, his feelings and his thoughts, then a person has to know that it seems like thought is higher than feeling. See, there's the two things that make up human life. The main things in us are our thoughts and our feelings. We experience life through our thoughts, and we feel our thinking. And we feel everything, and it comes through the world of thinking, the feelings come. Without thought, we wouldn't experience anything. And without thought, we wouldn't have feeling. And the feeling, it comes as we're thinking. So Rav Kook writes like this. He writes that a person should know that it seems like thought is higher than feeling, because thought is what creates the feeling. The feeling comes out of the thought. I think about something which I like, so that I have a good feeling. I think about something which I don't like, something that I'm afraid of, so I have a bad feeling. So wherever I'm thinking, that's where my feelings are going. It's like a horse in the wagon. The feeling goes after the thought. So it seems like the thought is higher. But Rav Kook explains that that's true until you get to a very cultivated, refined type of thought and the feeling that comes out from that. And then when you get to that type of feeling, there's a place where the feeling gets where it goes beyond thought. Because when you, for example, when we're talking about here, a person that invested a lot into studying Torah and doing mitzvot, and then what happens is he gets this feeling for the mitzvot. So what happens is that feeling is the highest thing of all in some ways. Even though it would seem like it came from thought, so it seems like thought is higher, but now the feeling contains thoughts which you can't even express. The feeling contains, the feeling represents for you, you're feeling all this type of thought, which is not even verbal thought. It's not thought you can articulate. It's so lofty. And the Baal God is telling the Chacham, he's telling him that feeling is at the height of experience. The type of feeling that goes with you is even higher than thought in some ways, because it contains thoughts we can't express, and yet we can feel them. So that's the center of Judaism, that when you get to this place of a feeling, with a feeling for the Torah, a feeling for the mitzvahs, feeling of being close to Hashem, a feeling that you're connected to your own wisdom, so then a feeling for others, a feeling for truth, so then what happens is that's the center of Judaism. That's where everybody's going. So whether it's the Russia, or whether it's the Tom, or whether it's the Enudei show, the Russia, the evil son, or the simple son, or the son that is not articulate, doesn't know how to ask, or the wise son who does have, he's curious and he's having good questions. All of them, they got to go towards the same place. They got to go, and they have to realize that Hashem is talking to them, Hashem is reaching to them, Hashem is telling them that you have choice. You can move close. You can start being curious. You can start being fascinated by the Torah, by the wisdom that's in the world, and that's in the Torah especially. And you can start moving closer and closer. You start examining the Torah and start asking questions, and become a wise person that wants to know and doesn't think he knows already. It doesn't take his thinking on surface, doesn't take his thinking as the bottom line. The way I think right now, the way I feel right now, is that's my thought, and that's my feelings. That doesn't mean that that's who I am. It just means that's where I am. But if you're in a negative place, if you're far away, if you feel not smart or not accomplished or not connected, so all that the Torah is going to keep bringing you near. And you have to not give up. You have to go and you have to look for those inner resources. And also, if you're a chacham, you say, why do I have to take so much time learning, and why do I have to be such accomplished person? So Torah is telling us that as we go and we get curious about the mitzvahs, and we get fascinated by the mitzvah, and fascinated by the details of the mitzvah, what happens is it comes out and it's this central feeling, the feeling of the Yiddish feel. And that feeling is what will guide me through the life in the ultimate, in the ideal way that a Jew wants to go, is we have the feeling which is higher than thought, feeling which makes me connected, which makes me fully alive. So basically that's what I wanted to speak out today. And if anybody has questions, we can talk about them. Let me recap a little more. Yeah, question?
You cut out there right at the end.
Okay, sorry about that. I cut out, I'm gone? I'm still there, I'm not there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So just let me recap. So basically, the Torah speaks to every person. That's what we're saying over here. Keneged arba banim dibur Torah. Every attitude, nobody is excluded from the Torah. Nobody's lost. Nobody needs to give up. Nobody needs to be discouraged. I mean, they can be discouraged, but they don't have to realize that they can be discouraged temporarily, but they have to know that the Torah is there for them, and they can always find their way in. And they have to know they always have choice. And sometimes you seem like you don't have choice. It seems like that because your thoughts are so strong, and your feelings are so strong, you feel so disconnected, or you feel so not able to, you don't feel curious, or you feel passive, or not. Yeah. So, or even if you are, more smart, and you are intellectually capable, and you have curiosity, you feel like you don't know how you're going to get to your own potential through the Torah. So the Torah addresses all this. And the teacher here is a person he knows how to talk to each person. That's what the Torah does for us as well. It teaches us how to talk to every other person. So and it teaches us that as we start to get curious and we start to get fascinated, to understand what we don't understand, and start to listen to the Torah, what it's teaching us, now it's talking to us. So what happens is it moves us towards this new type of feeling. A new type of feeling will come in, the feeling which is going to guide us through life, which is the key to living, really. Okay, anyway. So that's what I wanted to say today. Any comments? Anybody? Okay, so very good. So everyone should have a great Chag Sameach, and we should have Kol HaBrachot.
I got a question.
Okay, good.
You were talking about how the wicked son excludes himself.
Yeah.
But isn't there times when we exclude people, and rightfully we should? Like, I mean, you shouldn't have a guy or a girl immodestly dressed at your Shabbat table playing on their cell phone.
Right, correct. That could be. I mean, if you can't manage that, maybe you could manage it somehow, but usually not. You're right. And there are also other times there are a lot of people that are very antagonistic. Like I said, this son at the Seder table is not really a Russia. He's just could become a Russia because he has this attitude where it's exclusive. But a Russia is someone who's actually antagonistic, trying to tear down the Torah, or even through certain, like being very not modest or something, is actually being aggressive in a ways. So, yes? What? I'm just finishing up here, sorry. So, hold on, one second, sorry. I just finished up my class, okay? And so you're right. So definitely sometimes not everybody can, someone who's actually a Russia who actually, or even a person not intentionally, but they're doing things which make it that we can't keep the Torah properly. So then yes, they will be excluded, but that's not excluded in theory. That's excluded at this moment. That's excluded in this situation. But in theory, nobody's excluded. And if we have a chance, sometimes we can't reach out to them, but Hashem is still reaching out to them and the Torah is still reaching out to them, and we'll find opportunities to reach out to them as well. So nobody is actually excluded. I mean, it's definitely, we have to go against evil people. And that's a big issue nowadays. It really is. There are people that are trying to destroy the Torah. And those are people that are latching on to anti-Jewish ideas, even though they might be Jewish. And they want to undermine the principles of the Torah. So those people you have to actually fight them sometimes and oppose them. That's correct. But the Torah loves them. The Torah wants them to come near, and they have in them the potential to come near again. And if they ask you a question, if they're sitting at your table and they say, what's all this to you? And you tell them, well, the choice is yours. And you don't want to exclude, you want to tell them that you're in also. As soon as you make the right choice, you're in, I don't know if that answers your question.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, Rabbi Rothman.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. Take care. Chag Sameach.